If we get down to a 5% handle, anywhere from 5 to 5.99, that you've got buyers that are ready to re-enter the market, which feel more comfortable with that PITI payment. And I think that's what we're going to see happen here. Going back to some of the purchase application data, as well as what you're seeing if you're in the business, is that anything with that 5 handle on it is a mover. Welcome back to the What's More podcast. I'm your host, Quentin Harris. You're dialed in for episode 196. And today we're going to talk about the drive for 5. What does that mean? Well, what that means is this. We're going to talk about pent-up demand. Yeah, there's buyers that are ready to get back in the market, especially after what happened last week. And then we're going to be talking about the lock-in effect. Is it time to start thinking unlock, and what does that mean? So let's kick off the episode here. Let's talk about this recent survey that took place from Mphasis Digital Risk. And inside that survey, they surveyed prospective buyers. And what they found in this survey was that 42% of prospective buyers said, hey, listen, anything with a 5 handle on, I'm back in the market. I'm ready to buy. I'm ready to actively start putting in purchase and sales agreements again, and ready to be a homeowner. What was interesting to me in this article was that an additional 27%, so roughly about 70% of the market said, hey, listen, between 4% and 5%, we're all in. Now, I don't think we're going to get to 4s without discount points of some level. But it's interesting to me that 70% of the market, roughly 70% of the market said, hey, 5 or a 4 handle, we're back in. But the majority of that survey was a 5. And that's the drive for 5 I want to talk about. That drive to get down to 5% handle. And if you're in the business, it could be a 5.875. It could be a 5.99. But that 5 is going to make the difference. And I can tell you, we've already experienced that. We've talked about on the podcast a couple of times, those dips in rates that have happened when we've seen originators with the ability to get a 5 handle without discount points, or maybe just 1 discount point. You see applications go through the roof. You see a lot more contracts come through. You're even seeing people take advantage of the refinances that are available. And you're starting to see that in some of the application data that's out there. I mean, matter of fact, the last 13, 14 weeks of purchase application data has been very encouraging. It's been some of the highest we've seen all year. And the reason for that is that we've seen some of these dips in rates started to happen in preparation for the Fed Reserve's rate cut, especially after they went so dovish in their recent commentary at Jackson Hole. One of the things I wanted to show on this thing was that the lock-in effect. And for me, the lock-in effect has just been this misnomer that's out there. I feel like I've been talking about it for 2 years. And whether you believe in it or you buy in it or not, it is somewhat real. And I think the same thing goes with pent-up demand. There's a lot of people that argue, no. There's no such thing as pent-up demand. I would argue in this market, over the last really 3 years, we've had 4.2 to 4.7 million prospective home buyers that have not bought a home yet. And they've either attempted, or they're outpriced, or the affordability is there. But that's the pent-up demand. And there's 4.2 to 4.7 million over the last 3 years, specifically post-COVID, that are ready to buy a home that haven't purchased yet. And that's your bulk pent-up demand. And what I take from that is the survey results. Obviously, I didn't survey all those people, but you can use this as an example of what those people may be thinking. And so that's the pent-up demand. And if you're in the business, you've seen it. And if you're listening to this podcast, I imagine you've either thought about buying a home in the last 3 years, intrigued about buying a home over the last 3 years, you've applied to buy a home over the last 3 years, and maybe you've even gone as far as putting a purchase agreement, a pre-approval offer in on a home that you did or did not win. That's pent-up demand. And we've talked about the discouraging aspect of that with the price points, but I think one of the things that's also impacting that pent-up demand of a buyer is the PITI. When you buy a home, everything comes down to that payment. There's 2 factors besides rate that I think are impacting that pent-up demand. You got taxes and insurance that are making a big play in this, both which more expensive now than ever before, especially homeowners insurance. And depending on what part of the country you live in, it's a vast differential compared to what it was 3 years ago. The Florida, the Texas market, even California, those insurance costs are out of control, almost in some cases overtaking the taxes as far as the bulk of the payment. And so I think that is a big portion of it as well. Now, of course, rate can offset that, but not enough for the rise in those costs. So we've got some things working against the homeowners there that have led to this pent-up demand. It's not just interest rate. I'm aware of that. And of course, the big elephant in the room is the purchase price, right? I understand that as well. But it's apparent to me that if we get down to a 5% handle, anywhere from 5 to 5.99, that you've got buyers that are ready to re-enter the market, which feel more comfortable with that PITI payment. And I think that's what we're going to see happen here. And what's interesting is that, again, going back to some of the purchase application data, as well as what you're seeing if you're in the business, is that anything with that 5 handle on it is a mover. People will make that move quickly. It's almost like the psyche of the buyer is like, hey, listen, I need something with a 5 handle on it and I'm ready to move. And the survey mimics exactly what we're seeing as we've had these rate dips. But let's go back to the lock-in effect. again, this is something I've talked about for some time. And if you recall, and if you've been following the podcast, roughly 90%, about 89% of the market has a 5% or below handle on their mortgage that currently own a home. And a lot of that's due to extremely low rates during COVID and people taking advantage of either buying a home or refinancing and locking in that rate. But that lock-in effect has also caused inventory to be constricted. That's one of the results of the lock-in effect, because the ideology of, hey, listen, I own a home. I've got such a low PITI payment that I'm comfortable with here. I'm not ready to go make a move to a higher interest rate. And less than a year ago, we were at 7-8% interest rates. There was no reason to make that move. That a lot of people either moved because they had to, or moved because there was some sort of change in lifestyle, divorce, death, et cetera. They didn't do it just because, very rarely they do it just because they wanted another home, right? There was a need or a want that had to take place during that time. Right now, you still got a tremendous amount of homeowners locked in on those rates that are 5% or below. So now it bodes the question with equity at all-time high positions. And we've talked about this over and over again on the podcast. This equity position is at an all-time high. Some will argue that it's false equity. We've done several podcasts on why we don't think that's correct statement. You know, I've got all the foreclosure bros out there online that keep talking about, oh man, it's 2009 all over again. And it's like, dude, you're chasing a ghost. We've been talking about that. And, you know, I just had an amazing podcast with Logan Matashami on the podcast from the Housing Wire. And he came in here and cleared the air on that and did an amazing job. One of the things that he talked about, you know, we mentioned in the last episode was, you know, labor over inflation, what that labor market's doing and driving the Federal Reserve's decision making. And if you listen to our last episode, we talked about that. But the reality that these home prices are just going to drop down out of want is a false narrative. And it's because of the lack of inventory and this lock-in effect that's causing this constraint. And I will say this, it's interesting. Now, this survey did not talk about homeowners. This is just prospective homeowners. If it drops down to that 5 handle permanently without discounts and it stays there for some time, we're going to see a wave of two things. Refinances are going to take place because of that equity. People do need that money at some capacity, especially as we've talked about some of the credit card debt that's lingering out there, as well as people saying, hey, listen, I want to take that and put that as cash on the sidelines in fear of what's going on in the economy. And as long as I can get a similar rate to what I have, I'm comfortable with that. And then there's another group that says, listen, I've outgrown this house. I need to move on from this house, but I can't do that at today's rates. I can do that at a rate I'm comfortable with a 5 handle on it. You're going to see a significant wave of refinances and sells. And the cool thing about that is that every seller, for the most part, is a buyer. So you're going to see a transaction on top of a transaction. This is going to be very fluid there. And, you know, we use the example of musical chairs, right? There's going to be a seller to a buyer, buyer to a seller. It just keeps going until the inventory is really flipped and turned over. And so that lock-in effect is real, and it will come unlocked during that time. And I think that for many people, many economists, many forecasters, we all thought that was going to happen late 23 at some capacity, and it didn't show up because the rates didn't stay where they were sustained because of the lack of cooperation from the Federal Reserve, who was being very resistant and being very hawkish. The market did not get what it was anticipating, so we saw this resistance happen. Now we're getting all those right comments. We're seeing all the economic data support that, and it's just a matter of time. And I think time is absolutely on our side here. It's going to happen rather quickly and unlock a tremendous amount of this lock-in effect. And so I think that's encouraging. And when I look at some of this further emphasis on this survey, this drive for 5 here, part of this Q3 2024 survey was that how encouraged are you that mortgage interest rates are going to drop soon? And this was interesting because literally 65% of the survey said they're either very encouraged or somewhat encouraged. This is a vast differential from where it was last quarter. And I think that's because the news is now talking about potential rate cut, drop in interest rates. It's so well talked about and advertised now that I think it's getting out to the masses and the public starting to digest it. This is encouraging because these are pent-up demand buyers that are going to come to the market, take advantage of the marketplace, and hopefully partake in some of that unlock effect inventory that's going to come up there, buy those homes, and then turn around and either the homeowner that's selling their home goes and buys another home. So there's a lot of opportunities that are set to arise here that I think, hey, listen, it's encouraging from the standpoint that finally, as these rates get to where we want to see, we can sit back and say, it's finally here. And I think that's something that we just haven't been able to really do. We've been anticipating something to happen, and then it doesn't happen. And now we're beyond anticipation. We're more into certainty, and this is great for our market. So if you're a originator in this, man, now is the time to level up. Now is the time to say, hey, listen, how do I stay in touch with my database that's locked in? what's their target interest rate need to be for me to go ahead and make sure that they can go ahead and get that refinance that they're trying to get, or get ready for the purchase of what they've been talking to me about to buy the home that they've been looking for. If I'm a real estate agent, I'm in my database. I want to know, what does it look like? What's the target rate of my potential buyers need to be when they say, I'm ready to buy, but I need to rate it like 5.875. Get in contact with your originator and say, hey, listen, how can we get to a 5.875 in the next 30 days? What type of strategy do we need to put together to make this happen for my buyers? And if you have sellers that are saying, we're willing to sell, we'd love to sell it for this, and we know the market will bear that, but we're not going to move into a new home unless the rate is X. What's the target rate need to be there, and work those same strategies with your originator that you work with so that you can get to those levels here rather quickly. And I'll wrap it up with this. I was on you could call it a study hall if you want to, or a mastermind of originators phone call yesterday. And it was interesting. One of the psychies, this guy's a pretty good originator. One of the psychies was, hey, listen, if the Federal Reserve doesn't drop rates by 50 basis points, they only do it a quarter. Like, he had this thought process, this notion that maybe rates would bump up, because his thought was that the market's anticipating so much of a drop. If it doesn't get that, could rates go ahead and actually creep back up? And it was interesting, and he had some good points to it. And I don't say he was dismissed by any means, because it was a great point, but I think that just goes to show the psyche of the lending world right now, that every time we think something's good's going to happen, we always are pulling back for the bad now, because over the last 2 years, we've seen nothing really go the way of the market as far as rates are concerned that we've wanted it to go, plus we've anticipated it to go. But as I told that person, I go, now's the time. Now's the time. Go ahead, brace yourself, because good things are coming. Because when these rates get to this level that are sustainable in the fives, you can almost say all hell is going to break loose in a good way, because that's what's going to happen. It is going to be so busy that the people that are remaining in the industry are going to feel as if they were in 2021, 2020 volumes all over again. And so the question is, how long will we be there? That's the next question. How long do we stay at that level? And I will say this. I think that level is going to be like a feeding frenzy at first. Like, everyone's going to be on it, and then it'll kind of drift off, even though the mortgage rates may not change. It's just once that appetite of that pent-up demand is satisfied and those unlocked loans come out of the lock-in effect, I think you're going to see a huge wave right away. And then I think what happens is, anytime affordability enters the market, it gets absorbed by the price of the product, meaning that you're probably going to see the home prices go up. Maybe not significantly in your market, but they will creep up. And there's some markets where they'll go up significantly. And I think once you get to that point of affordability that was there because of the lower rates, that has now gone away because of the rise in the price, that's when that appetite becomes satisfied, and we get back into a normal style market that we traditionally have seen pre-COVID, just a normal, consistent market. So what does that frenzy look like? Could it be 6 months? Could it be 8 months? Could it be 6 weeks or 8 weeks? That we don't know, but we're about to find out. And I'm excited about it, and I hope you guys are too. So if you like what you're hearing, please share this podcast. Check us out at YouTube at our channel at What's Your One More. We're on every single platform that you listen to. We'd love to get reviews, 5-star reviews on Apple specifically. Leave us some comments, and check us out with all the graphs information that our wonderful producer Charlie puts into each episode. All right, guys, we'll have all the survey results of this on our YouTube channel at What's Your One More. And thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you at the next episode.
Got one more shot, I'm gonna make it. One more chance, I'm gonna take it. I meant it when I said it, now it's time for me to do it. I got one life to live, so I put my all into it, yeah.